At the very heart of the industrious village that I live lies a Victorian iron foundry, straight out of the Industrial Revolution. And it's only a few years ago that most of these buildings were left abandoned. They were just a reminder of the implement-making powerhouse that once served the agricultural landscape around it. Even the nearby farms that I grew up on had bits and pieces that this foundry had produced over 100 years ago. So that just goes to show how productive this place was. To deliver the lumps of cast metal, they didn't have diesel guzzling HGVs, they just had carrot-powered horses pulling carriages. So once upon a time, the coach house would have housed 5 horses and a carriage and an entire floor full of horse fuel. But now, it just contains an electrician, building materials and a lazy, grumpy cat. I'm going to give you the backstory of how I bought the coach house and what I've had to do to be able to move in. When I was about 21, I managed to save up about £5,000. I was a recently qualified electrician and I was still living at home and paying very little rent, so it meant that I could put down a 5% deposit on a house. And the nearest place to where I wanted to live was an industrious village, and the house that I could afford was a pebble dash 2 up 2 down end of terrace. And underneath all of the wood chip was a little charming foundry cottage wanting to say hello. So I spent the next few years renovating it all. I put in a loft conversion and then took pretty much all of the rooms back to brick. And if I look at it from a financial perspective, there was no way that it was worth me doing it. But from a learning perspective, it was completely invaluable. I discovered that I have a passion for renovating buildings, and the door of conservation and breathable walls and lime and solid wall construction just started to just creep open a little bit. And I was just starting to understand that modern building techniques and materials aren't actually suitable for these old buildings. So once the house was finished, I started to feel a bit uneasy. I needed a project to get my teeth sunk into. And I couldn't help notice this beautiful coach house that had been up for sale for a couple of years. And the cogs started whirring, and I thought it would make an amazing workshop downstairs and I could live upstairs. So I started doing some inquiries locally. I was told to stay well clear. There were problems like it had an asbestos roof on it, it had been structurally condemned, it had nasty covenants attached to it, the floor was rotten from when the roof had blown off, it was difficult to get services to it. But all of this sounded brilliant to me. So regretfully it was time to sell my lovely little house. When everything had exchanged, I didn't get any keys for the coach house. I simply got permission to remove the piece of plywood that was covering an opening. And I could finally get to work and get the ball rolling. The first port of call was getting in touch with an architect. The first architect that came out didn't even look inside the building. He just had a look outside, spoke to me, and then said I was out of my depth and he wasn't interested. The second architect was lovely. He wanted to knock the building down and put 2 up in its place, which just went completely against the grain for me. I was at a bit of a loss, until a friend recommended Jonathan Green. The first set of plans included the lovely spiral stairs. I'm out of an iron foundry in Leeds, but unfortunately that set of plans was objected against. I had some particularly tricky neighbours that had already expressed their disdain for me converting the building. The contentious issue was the spiral stairs, so we removed that, fair enough. The second application went in and that was also rejected, and I spent the next few months arguing the toss over his decision. Eventually, persistence prevailed and the officer's refusal justification was disarmed. The application was approved. The next hurdle to jump over was the services. I need to get water, electric and sort the drains out. The first quote for electric was something like £12,000 and GTC was something like £3,000. So that was a huge saving. And so it just pays to have a look around. And then the next job was getting the water connected up. And even though there's a water pipe running next to the building, I couldn't use that because it was an old type and it had to go to the roadside. Fortunately, a local company called Dale's Water have a directional mole, and they dug from the building about 100 metres to the roadside and with pinpoint accuracy brought a water pipe, a gas pipe and a phone line pipe up. So that was there ready. It took about a year until Yorkshire Water connected the water pipe up, after I was constantly chasing them, and it was a friend of a friend actually told me to use CCW, who are a regulatory body. So if you're having trouble with Yorkshire Water, get in touch with CCW. Once I'd contacted them, water was connected in about 2 weeks. So they must have some weight behind them. So the next job was a good opportunity to pressure wash all of the timbers and get all of the muck off them. So I spent a few days precariously wobbling around on ladders, and they came up lovely once they dried out. Blasting all of the 100-odd years of muck off them was extremely therapeutic, and they just came up beautifully. So the next job was sorting out the entrance. I'd fitted a PVC door temporarily, which came off a friend's renovation job, which I'm actually using as a bedroom door as we speak. One day I was working opposite my old village hall, and it's a lovely village hall with some beautiful doors and windows in it. And I noticed that there was a couple of workers working on the doors, and I thought they must be removing them to renovate them, to give them a bit of a spruce up. But after seeing one of them take a sawzall to the hinge, I thought, no they're not. They're removing them altogether. They're replacing them. So I went over there and I saw what was up, and then they were going to put PVC doors on. I thought to myself, that is a criminal thing to do, considering it's the part of the building you interact with, looking through the windows, looking through the doors, and you're touching the doors, and putting PVC on such a lovely building seems like an absolute crime. But regardless, I managed to get the doors because they were chucking them away. I mounted them onto some old floor joists out of the building, and then used some reclaimed floorboards for the sides. The next job was the floor. So I sat on one day with a bar which I've got a good relationship with. We've been through some emotional times together. I took the bar, went into the floor, and it was just like steel on steel. There was not a chance I was going to break it up by hand. And I hired a digger with a pecker on it, and then spent the next few days breaking it all up. And eventually it was up, and my ex-girlfriend and I actually shifted a lot of it out of the building. And I got to a point in this room where I was literally out of my depth. So I called up my brother-in-law, and he came in to save the day because he's fantastic with this sort of thing. We had to get rid of the rubble somehow, so we got that main archway unblocked. Steve and I fitted a drop curb, and then I put up an electric roller door. Downstairs there are 3 rooms. The bottom left room was now ready for a new floor to be put down, but we still needed to break the concrete up in the other 2. Now, with the archway unblocked, we could get Howard's much larger, more powerful digger in, and it made light work of breaking all of the concrete up. We soon ended up with a huge mountain of it which needed leading away. In the main carriage room, it was like peeling back time as we found some blue stable block bricks underneath the concrete. Before the floor could go down, I needed to put the drains in. I thought I did a really good job of putting them all in, but when the building inspector came out to check them, I'd done it all wrong. I had to put a lintel in, and then I needed to take every single connection out to a manhole cover, which makes perfect sense. You need to be able to rod it all. And then once I'd done that, the floor could go down. Howard, Clyde and I then put down the subfloor. The first layer of that was a load of crush and roll, tamped down, followed by a layer of sand, visqueen, and then filled with concrete. Once the subfloor was in, I got a load of render taken off. After the render was taken off, I put this tanking up, which was a mistake really. I've taken a lot of it off now as I've used a different approach. I put this up because I was advised to do that by the building inspector, but in my opinion it's the wrong approach as you're working against nature with an unnatural material. I've since removed a lot of it and put the wood fibre insulation on. The insulation then went down on top of the subfloor. Again, I'm not sure if this is the right method, but it's not quite as easy to change. I made sure I taped it all up and put a good 50mm upstand all the way around so that the walls didn't suck all of the heat out of the floor. Underfloor heating was going in 2 of the downstairs rooms. Once the pipes had been laid, it meant that the final layer of the floor build-up could go down, the screed. Little did I know that the most challenging part of this floor was yet to come. I don't know how to do it, I don't know I didn't have a clue what I was getting myself in for. I'd been quoted about £6,000 to have the floor professionally ground down, and I thought, oh, that's very expensive. I can buy a floor grinder for £800, which I did off eBay. And then I spent about £1,000 on diamond discs, epoxy resins and lithium hardener, and spent in working hours, it must have been 2 to 3 weeks of solid floor grinding, following this wretched grinder, which I had a love-hate relationship with. Sometimes I just loved its tenacity and its ability to keep powering on and getting through all the sludge, and then I would hate it, my back would be in pieces. I was just sick of the drone of the vacuum cleaner and would love to be doing anything but polishing this floor. But eventually the muck started to get less and less, and I got to the part of the floor grinding polishing process where the reflection started to come, and it was extremely rewarding. The next job, the elephant in the room, the job that I've been putting off, was the roof. I was living in a rented bungalow at the time, and I spent the whole winter researching materials because I decided to do the rest of the architectural work myself, so I needed to present everything in a format that the building inspector would understand and approve, so he needed to give me the thumbs up before I went ahead and did it. I wanted to do a warm roof and keep all the rafters exposed because I thought they looked really good, and a warm roof just makes so much sense to me. You don't have to cut insulation in slots, and it just works. I had a pretty specific brief of what I wanted the roof to do and be. It had to look sexy, obviously, black corrugated sheets, in-roof solar panel system, metal gutters, the reclaimed barge boards, which are old floor joists from a factory, and it needed to let light in. It had to let smoke out for the chimney, for the log burner, keep the rain out, and make power. That was really important to get done. So there were lots of things to consider, and it needed to be warm as well. Part of the sexy criteria was for it to have a little bit of an overhang. I think that's good for the walls. It suits the building, helps make a crisp line. With the invaluable help of friends and family, a lid was firmly placed back onto round corner, which meant I could get back to my electrical work to pay the bills. For the last 10 years I've been a self-employed electrician, which gives me the flexibility to do these projects, but there's one major caveat: if I don't work, I don't get paid. After a non-stop summer, there was a huge pivotal change to my life. My girlfriend and I went separate ways. I decided to get moved into Round Corner imminently, so I worked as much as I physically could to get myself set up for camping out. Admittedly, this is a false economy, which results in breaking something or myself, and this time was no different. I was making a stud room where I'm sat here now. So I was putting a screw in with a really aggressive cutter screw, and I was holding a piece of bent timber to try and bend it into place against the joist, and as I pushed in, and you know when something's gone bad. I could feel it go to the bone. I had to unscrew it out of my finger. I pulled it off, and it was just, there's all sorts of bits hanging out of the finger together, so I wrapped up a load of tissue onto it and insulation tape, got back home, looked at it, and thought, oh god, this is bad, but I didn't have time to go to A&E. I washed it off the best I could, and then there was some little stringy bits sticking out, and I cut one of the stringy bits, and then blood started squirting out like out of a horror film. You could see my pulse coming from the blood, and I thought, oh, for God's sake. So I ordered some stitches on Amazon and some little finger socks, and got it sort of bandaged up the next day, which worked a treat. It's all gone back together, but I can't feel the end of my finger anymore. I managed to get the downstairs segregated so that I could work upstairs freely without causing havoc to where I'm living. The aim is to move upstairs once it's done and to use the downstairs as a workshopy sort of creative space. I'm not 100% sure yet, time will tell, and it'd be interesting to know what you would do with the space. I've been making videos on YouTube over the past year or so, editing the footage at this desk, and we've done all sorts on the channel. Made a hoist for lifting materials, opened up a 100-year-old entrance and created a door out of reclaimed wood to fill the hole, installed a spiral staircase, played with hot lime mixes, and even had a go at things like plumbing. Last winter was pretty grim. I was in a plasterboard prison cell when it was cold and drafty, but I kept my hand out to the building and gave it my unconditional support, and piece by piece started putting it back together and making it strong again. And I found that the building had actually been doing the same for me too. From that, I managed to start this YouTube channel, which is something that I've always wanted to do, and I've been really enjoying the journey so far, and there's loads more to be done here, and there's loads more to share. So I hope you've enjoyed this video, kind of trying to tie everything together to make sense of it all, and I hope it has made sense. But I'm going to leave this one here for now, and thank you very much for watching. Ciao for now.